Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Masson. I'm a developer on the Integration Services team. I'm an Integration Services user. Today, I'm going to talk about new things in SQL Server Denali, or I guess I should call it 2012 at this point. So just a quick show of hands. Who here is familiar with what's been delivered so far in CTP3 for Denali? OK, most people. So I wasn't going to review, I'm not going to go into in-depth about what's been delivered so far. There have been a lot of things delivered so far. In fact, I've tried fitting it all into one session. I can't fit it all into one session. There's a lot of stuff. What I'm focusing on today are brand new things that have been delivered post-CTP3, right? Things that are still to come. There's a couple of new announcements today. There'll be a couple of things that will be shown for the first time today as well. I'm also going to call out some of the features that were in CTP3, but were either tweaked post CTP3 or I felt didn't get enough love and I wanted to call out. So I do like interactive sessions, but we do have a lot of stuff going on today. That said, if you have quick questions, quick comments, feel free to call them out. Quick side story. I was presenting in SQL Bits in the UK a couple weeks ago, a great conference, and my audience didn't ask any questions. And they were just silent, dead silent, and just staring at me. And so I asked the UK MVPs about it, and they said, no, that's really typical in a big audience in the UK because they want to be polite, and they won't ask a question unless they think it affects everybody in the room. I'm like, wow, they want to be polite, a polite audience. That's very different from some of the North American audience I speak with. For example, a gentleman last year at PASS who was very adamant that I should fix his web services task problems up on stage, even though it was completely unrelated to the demo I had just done. But anyways, that said, quick questions, comments. I do like things interactive. My audience enjoys interactive sessions, so please call it out. If you do want to complain about web services task, I will be at the EIM Dev Pod, and I'd be glad to hear your story and pretend that I care. I'm kidding. I do deeply care about each and every one of your SSIS issues. OK. So quick recap for Denali. We have a lot of stuff, and there's great resources out there already. There's a tech ed presentation that I did. It covers all the CTP3 features, and even then I ran out of time. As a high-level overview, there's two main areas we're focusing on. The developer experience. This fell into two different sets of improvements. One was to make the product more accessible to new users. So SSIS has a bit of a learning curve. I'm sure most people in this audience have gotten over that curve. But new people joining up or people on your team that you're trying to mentor, right, we try to basically create a ramp, make it easier to get into SSIS. On top of the new, easy-to-use features, we did a lot of productivity enhancements, like key features like undo, for example, stuff that we should have had all along. Or things like expression markers on icons. And I know you guys at the back can't read this list, but I didn't mean for you to read this list. There are a lot of stuff. If you're interested in actual demos, we have all the tech ed demos at the pavilion, on the machines at the pavilion. You can go by, and anybody there can walk you through the features. So on top of the developer features, we also improved the administration experience, right? Because a lot of the times, the people doing the deployment, doing the maintenance, doing the scheduling and execution of the packages aren't the people who developed it. And we want to make it easier for them as well. And all this revolves around this new centralized SSIS Catalog. I think in the keynote this morning, they talked about a standalone server. I assume that that's what they mean, the SSIS Catalog, unless it's a brand new feature that I don't know about. But anyways, yeah, so everything around that. And that's improved deployment, making configuration a lot easier, making logging automatic, built-in reporting, right? All the stuff that, we talked to customers at the beginning of Denali, and we found that most customers were spending 80% of their time not on the data movement, but on everything else, right? On the execution, on the deployment, setting up frameworks, logging frameworks, execution frameworks, right? We wanted to make that all automatic. But at the same time, guarantee that if you've made that investment, if you've done that already, that will continue to work in Denali as well. Okay? So those are the two main areas. Before I go into the actual features, I'd like to cover some of the high-level concepts, because this is kind of core to the Denali release. Okay? Two new concepts, projects and parameters. Anybody here hasn't seen projects and parameters for Denali so far? Okay, there are a couple. So the first thing is that today, in 2005, 2008, right, when you have a project in Visual Studio, and it's a bunch of DTSX files. But once you move to deployment, like once you deploy that to production, the concept of the project goes away. You just have a bunch of files. and execute package tasks. We're calling child packages. They use connection managers to find those files. And those files can be anywhere. Okay? That creates a couple of problems. One, when you're moving from environment to environment, you have to update your references and worry about where things are pointing. Two, DBAs complain because they don't know what packages are being pulled in from where, right? You could be pulling them from anywhere. So we've extended that concept of the project for Visual Studio down to the runtime, down throughout the whole runtime. So now, within Visual Studio, when you do a build, it compiles down to a .ispack, which I'm apparently told is called an IcePack file. I've been hearing multiple presenters call it an IcePack, so I missed the memo. But yeah, so it compiles down to it's essentially just a zip file. But this becomes your deployable project file. This is your deployable unit. So you can run through a wizard. You send all your packages to a new destination, new environment at once. And that IcePack file contains everything you need to actually run. You can even run it with DTExec as well. Run the packages directly. Okay. Parameters were meant to address the configuration issues, right? Today, packages can pull in configurations, and those configurations can be anywhere. It's a management nightmare for DBAs, right? It could be pulling it from SQL, it could be pulling it from environment variables, file system, right? You forget to update something, and you end up pulling in test data, right? This is really common problems that we see with a lot of customers. So we wanted to simplify this model. And we moved to a model called parameters. And parameters, a lot like parameters in any sort of programming language, it lets a package explicitly declare what it needs to run. Okay? So kind of like parent package variables, but you can look at a package and see exactly what it needs. So a child package might say, okay, to start, I need a server name and I need a batch number. And the parent package calling it and the execute package task can explicitly map variables from the parent to the child parameters that way. If you're running the package with SQL Agent or DTExec or anything, you can pass in the parameters that way as well. You can explicitly see what those parameters are. And if you look at a lot of the execution frameworks that people have put around SSIS today, it uses the exact same model, right? This is just formalizing it and making our UIs making it very clear in the UIs exactly what a package needs to actually run. We're really excited. We've been getting really good feedback on this stuff. The SSIS Catalog, this is the other major server component, and this is really meant to address the deployment and configuration issues. And it adds a number of different things. So essentially, the SSIS Catalog is it's a SQL Server user database. It's called SSIS DB. It has a full T-SQL API, a .NET API, and we'll take a look today at PowerShell interface as well. And you do all your management through SSMS. You connect to the SQL engine, and there's an Integration Services Catalogs folder, and under there, you can see all the packages deployed to the server, all the projects deployed to the server, and you do all your management there. And this gives you a couple of different things. One, it provides a central place for configuration, so you can set default parameter values when you run the package with SQL Agent or even interactively. You can set values as well. When you run the package, it actually runs on the remote server, so it really acts as a server. It doesn't download the package to your client machine and run it like it does today. Okay? And we also break out connection managers and make connection managers easier to configure as well. All connection managers are automatically exposed, and you're able to configure them directly. Security is another big thing for the server. Now, I know it doesn't happen often, but some people have reported they see, when they try to run a package with SQL Agent, they say a cannot decrypt password node. I know it's a really rare occurrence. But I don't know why you're laughing. We've basically set it up in a way so you should never see that error again. Okay? We've actually changed the way we do encryption. So when you deploy a project to the server, it automatically gets encrypted with server keys. And so everything's still stored in an encrypted format on the server. Everything's secure. But you don't have to worry about that user key problems like you did in the current product. We also have row-level security. So you can actually secure access at the catalog level, at the folder level, at the project level itself. And you have a lot of different security options when it comes to actually locking down your catalog. And it works well in environments where you have a single integration server with multiple teams working on it. You can each give them a folder and just set permissions accordingly, and they won't mess with each other's settings. Finally, management becomes a lot easier. Okay? When you run packages on the catalog, the logs are automatically captured. We have a set of built-in reports. You can get performance information. You can get execution statistics. Give me all the errors that have occurred in the last 24 hours. Everything like that. It's all logged in the tables, and it's all exposed in reports. And I'll be covering that as some of my top 10 items later on. Okay, now on to the new stuff. So like I said, the majority of the stuff today is brand new, is post-CTB3 stuff that will be appearing. And I'm also going to call out some of the features that I think need more love. The first things I want to talk about are we made the announcement this morning in the keynote, the partnership that we have with Attunity for two new components, a change data capture component and ODBC support. And Doug Wheaton from Attunity is coming up, and he's going to demo all this stuff for you.
Thanks, Matt. Again, my name is Doug Wheaton with Attunity, and I appreciate you putting change data capture and ODBC at the top of the list. Thanks very much. Can you hear me all right? Is that any better? Thanks, guys. Again, my name is Doug Wheaton. I do appreciate Matt putting change data capture and ODBC at the top of the list of the new features. We're going to go through first, spend most of the time on change data capture and some enhancements there, and then talk about a new ODBC source within SSIS. So for change data capture, what we're providing is CDC for Oracle databases. Works just the same way that CDC for SQL Server databases did with SQL 2008. It lets you capture changes for integration purposes, and it's, again, managed exactly like you do with SQL Server CDC. Quick check, how many people here use SQL Server CDC today? Okay, you're going to see a lot of familiar things here in the demo in just a moment. And then we also have provided, to make it easier to work in SSIS with these components, some new components to control how you process the changes that are captured. And it's going to work not just for the new Oracle CDC, but will also work for SQL Server CDC. So you'll be able to use these new components with both types. So let's talk about first CDC for Oracle. What's involved with it? We've got a CDC service. It's basically a Windows service that's going to be associated with the SQL Server database. There's an MMC console that we use to configure this. It's going to generate a configuration database on the SQL Server where all the information is stored, and it's going to be associated with one or more capture instances. A capture instance is just a grouping of tables from a particular Oracle database that we want to get changes from. And that is configured through a management console snap-in that walks you through a wizard, choose the Oracle tables that you want to work with, and also manage that process. And at the end of that, what it does is generate the same artifacts that you see with SQL Server change tables in the database that you're used to seeing today. And finally, to make it easier to work with in SSIS, we're introducing three new components. A control task, which you can use to determine what set of changes to work with. A source task, which lets you quickly connect to the change tables list of changes to be processed without having to go through stored procedures. And a split, what we call a CDC splitter, takes all the change information that are captured in those tables and split it out according to whether you've got inserts, updates, deletes. And we'll see all this here in just a second in the demonstration. And then I'll also briefly touch on ODBC after we go through the change data capture tasks. So let's see. Can we switch over? Thank you, sir. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the building of what we call a CDC service. Again, the CDC service for Oracle contains, it's a Windows service, and it contains one or more CDC instances. Key thing that it does is we've got a MMC snap in here that lets you prepare the SQL Server that we're going to talk to. You just tell which server we want to work with. In this one that I already have built, we can see that I'm working with my local server here. And there's configuration information about this and the related instances kept within a database on my target SQL Server. We'll see that's created in SSMS in just a moment. And when we have a CDC service built up, the next step is to create one or more CDC instances. In this case, I've got a couple different, what we call CDC instances. These are the groupings of tables from a particular Oracle database. And to create a new one, if I look at the steps here, it takes you through a wizard. I tell it which Oracle database to work with. I'm just going to connect to it through an Oracle client, select the tables, creates the logging for me, and it will generate the matching SQL Server table. Again, kind of the SQL Server table that you would have enabled for SQL Server CDC. Generates that table in the SQL Server database. And when we finish it, it's going to create all of those CDC artifacts that match what you would see in SQL Server CDC.
Yeah, so the thing I really love about this solution is that it's, to the SSIS perspective, it's completely transparent, right? That it's connecting to Oracle or SQL Server, right? It's all the same.
It makes no difference.
Right, and again, all this comes with a straight SQL Server install. There's no additional, I think there's additional MSI to get the actual Oracle thing, but it all comes with the SQL Server
It all comes with
install.
SQL Server install. Yeah, good point.
I'm not a licensing person, so you have to check. I assume that it's enterprise, but yeah, you need to check with the licensing people.
Okay. Again, beyond doing the design work, you can also manage the CDC instances from here. So we can see this particular instance is up and running. It's captured a couple 100,000 changes since it's been going on. But we can also take a look at the configuration of the Oracle system that I'm connecting to, and the tables that I've designed this one to capture from. In this case, 3 different tables: countries, employees, regions. Simple, good old Oracle Express database running in the background. So once I've got this created and have deployed this, again, it's going to create the artifacts that those of you that work with SQL CDC are used to working with, have seen again and again. So this is that CDC HR database that we worked with. We'll see the tables that get created. So that matches the source Oracle tables. These are empty. They're never going to have data in them. We just created these so we could map the metadata into the SQL Server and work it and build up the SQL artifacts. And then we see in the system tables all the familiar CDC schema, captured columns, et cetera, and the matching change tables where the changes are going to be available in. So again, this should look very familiar to you. It works just the same as SQL Server CDC. Okay? So at this point, we've got our CDC service. We've got a couple CDC instances built out with it. Now we want to use it within SSIS, within a couple, with using those new components. So what have we built in to SSIS? I've got a simple project here. In this case, it's going to apply changes that have been captured out to a target database. And so if I go out to the toolbox, we'll see that we've added a CDC control task, which we can use to determine what we want to do with the changes. And we just, if you take a look at what's involved here, we can do things like keep track of when we started the CDC processing, keep a bookmark when we finished it up, get the processing range of changes from the matching change tables. All this is built into this editor here.
So previously, if you're using SQL Server CDC, you need to track all this stuff yourself, right? You'd
All
log
the
in the SQL table, track when the last time the package was run. Now this is all taken care of just with this pass.
Yeah, this is going to save a fair amount of work. Thank you. And then, let me just go ahead and remove that. It still doesn't fix operator errors. And then within the data flow, we've got a new source component. In this case, it's a CDC source. And what the CDC source does is a couple different things. In the past, if you want to get changes, it was recommended to go through a couple of procedures to read the changes from the change tables. This allows you to choose. I've got a connection manager pointing to my change table, choose which table I want to get changes from, And then it also lets me choose what kind of processing mode I want to work with. I can get all the changes, in other words, every single insert, update, delete that was applied to the source table, or I can get net changes, in other words, just the most recent change for a particular primary key, or a couple of other different variations. But that's all built in here, so you don't have to build that out yourself. And then finally, we have a CDC splitter task. And what the CDC splitter does is it's like a conditional split task, but it will divide out the outputs into inserts, updates, and deletes.
So again, today you'd use a conditional split for that.
Right.
You'd check the status code, and now this just makes that easier as well.
Yeah. So again, these are now in your toolbox. You can work with these. I'm working, in this case, against an Oracle CDC instance, but it works the same with SQL Server CDC. Yeah, question?
Does it handle like the order in which the insert update or the insert?
By default, it's going to be sequenced by the order that they came in. There.
Are the new objects, I guess, created to store the sequence?
That's one of the things that you can create with these editors, basically a states table that lets you keep track of what the state is. And you saw that, you might have seen that in the SSMS in that table. I had a CDC states table that was created by one of these components.
Joe?
Did I see correctly that your source currently only supports ADO.NET sources, connections?
No, that's just what I happened to build out here.
How do you keep the Oracle data in sync with SQL Server tables?
That's a matter of how frequently you want to run the packages.
On the Oracle side, you're using LogMiner, right?
Yeah. So if the question is how do we capture the changes from the Oracle side, we use LogMiner under the covers to read the Oracle logs, so we're not going in and building triggers on the tables or anything like that.
So there's no components on the host on the Oracle server that has to be?
No, it's just a client connection out there.
Could you just repeat the question so we can hear it later in the background?
Good idea. I will start doing that now. The last question was, can I repeat the question? Okay, so those are the new SSIS components. Sorry, one more question.
Will your SQL Server relational database have to be on SQL Server 2012 in order to use the components in
For example, the SQL Server database that we're targeting. No.
Yeah. So the question is, does the target database, the source of the CDC changes, does it have to be SQL Server 2012? No, it's using standard SQL Server CDC, which was introduced in SQL 2008. So you need to be using 2012 SSIS, but your source databases can be 2008 or 2012.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So any more questions too? Because we don't have that much time to go into it, but we can. There's the Unity booth down in the exhibitor area, and they're more than happy to go into deep technical details on all this stuff.
We'd be happy to, and we'll let this run for a second. It's going to process about 107 changes, and the other thing that I want to at least mention is the ODBC components. So we've got a new ODBC source component. Come on. And the ODBC source, in this case, is going to point to an ODBC database that you configure like you would any other ODBC source. What we found is that it performs significantly faster than say an OLADB source of the same for the same type. Like, for example, use the Oracle ODBC client and the Oracle OLADB. We're finding the performance is better using the ODBC component.
Yeah, definitely for non-Microsoft or non-SQL Server databases, we're seeing the trend is usually ODBC. This is one of the reasons why we really want to have the ODBC connectivity in Denali. And I believe the ODBC destination supports bulk load as well.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you can do bulk or row by row.
Great.
All right. So, I know we don't have a lot of time. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for let me be the first one to present.
Yeah, thanks for coming up. And yeah, so just to summarize that. Right, so the overall goal, and you'll see it's a theme of Denali, is making SSIS easier to use, right? And these CDC components really do that. It becomes very simple to do incremental loads, to pick up incremental changes. You don't have to build all that framework yourself. It's just built in using these components. I love that you can be using Oracle or SQL Server, and it's completely transparent to SSIS. You barely have to change your packages, right? I think it's just a matter of changing the configuration on that first page. And yeah, it's great. For more information, like I said, go down to the exhibitor area, talk to the Tunity guys. They'll go into lots of details about how all this stuff works. So thanks a lot, Doug, for coming up and doing that demo for us.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay. So next up, connection managers. And now, some of these changes were in CTB3, and we've also made some further enhancements to connection managers in post-CTB3. So first up, if you haven't seen CTB3 yet, one of the big changes is we now have shared connection managers. A shared connection manager is a connection manager you define at the project level. It can be shared across all of your packages. Okay? It's like you get configured once and then just reused, no longer having to pass connection strings from parent to child. Okay? They're kind of like data source files, the .ds files, but they actually work. And we've actually removed. So does anybody use data source files currently? Okay, one person. Don't use them. Okay, we've also changed. Well, you'll see some fanciness down in the connection manager tab. So we have project level connection managers are indicated with the project thing. That red. I don't have to zoom in on this, but that red little icon there means an offline connection manager. And we did that to improve overall validation. Again, I've heard a number of customers reporting this, but sometimes if you open up a package in an environment where you don't actually have access to the connections, everything hangs, right? And one or two people have hit this before. And SSIS had this global setting. You could do work offline, and that would basically short circuit the connection managers. That was pretty brute force, though. That would kill all your connection managers. Now we do individual validation on connection managers. So when you open up the package, we validate them all in parallel. And if any of them time out, they're marked into an offline mode, and then all calls get short-circuited. So the longest you should ever have to wait is a single timeout. Okay? And you can right-click and move a connection manager offline if you don't want it to keep going out to the server. You can also right-click and say test connectivity, and it will bring it back online if it can connect. Okay? So you can set that. And then, thanks. Again, most of these features I didn't develop, but I'm more than happy to take credit for them because there's no one else from the team here, so applause is definitely welcome. And that last icon, there's a little expression icon. So we actually highlight expressions on connection managers, on tasks, on variables. Brand new feature. No one else has thought of this before, so it's great. Now, this last thing I did write myself, so I'd like to talk about it. So there's the cache connection manager. Anybody use the cache connection manager for lookups? Number of people? Okay, so in 2008, we added this new mode to lookup where you could actually create your own lookup cache using a data flow with a cache transform. And then you could reuse that cache, share that cache across lookups. Okay? So a lookup cache would only be read into memory once. So you could load it and then share it across 5 or 6 data flows within that package. If you create a project-level cache connection manager, now it stays in memory for the execution of all the packages. So if you have a master package running 60 child packages, you can create that cache once and it actually gets shared. So that's one use of the memory, and the cache is only created once. So very, very big in data warehousing scenarios. Yeah, and I did that myself. Okay. Question at the back? Updatable caches? No, the actual cache connection manager functionality hasn't been changed, except just the sharing thing. I do have a pattern on how to do incremental updates, but you can't just go in and update it. Flat file improvements. This is an improvement that was in CTB3, but I'd like to call it out because it is pretty big. We basically support variable number of columns. So if you're missing columns off the end, the flat file connection manager can still read that in, assuming the data types in the first columns are the same, right? But yeah, so we can actually automatically handle missing columns. And we also support embedded qualifiers. So if you have a string qualifier, like a single quote that shows down at the bottom, and you have an escape double quote or escape single quote, we can actually parse that out properly now too. So 2 new features. Thank you. Support for variant columns and embedded qualifiers. My boss did this feature, so maybe I shouldn't take credit for it. Okay, now I'll jump over to the demo. So I'm going to go through 3 demos here: package format changes, and use of Visual Studio configurations, which is new, and some scripting improvements, which is I just like to call out. Okay, so this is the new designer. You'll notice it looks slightly different from what Doug was showing. If this is your first time seeing the designer, I'll just call out really quick. Yes, we're running in Visual Studio 2010. We've actually made changes so we should be able to easily service the next time Visual Studio updates. We don't have to wait for a full release of SQL Server. There's the new toolbox we showed. There's the new toolbox we showed. It performs better. Anyways, if you want complete details, definitely go to the booth. There's lots of cool stuff. But you'll see that we changed the looks a little bit post CTB3. So the background color between the control flow and the data flow are different. So it just stands out. The coloring has changed a bit. One thing I was a bit sad about is the boxes. They're not as round. The corners aren't as round as they used to be, so they're not as aerodynamic. I know. The tasks, yeah, they're not quite pointy, so you won't lose an eye or anything. But yeah, the tasks are still well rendered, so we still have that performance improvement there. But oh yeah, that's true. I could add in smoke there. So, okay. So what I want to show is the package format changes. Has anybody tried diffing package XML before? Tried it? Okay. Has anybody tried merging package XML before? Okay. So it's quick. If you've never seen the package XML, so a DTSX file is just XML, right? In 2008, it was actually improved, and this was the improved version of our XML. Lots of stuff. To read through, my favorite part is the doubly encoded layout information with encoded annotations that you can't actually read and stuff. Anyways, that's what the format used to look like. Now, it's a lot cleaner. So let me just look at this. I do a view code. Right? So we do a couple of different things. We pretty print everything. Instead of using long, verbose elements, it's all attributes now. We don't persist default values anymore, so it greatly reduces the size of packages. We had this one package that was 5 megs in size, and it went down to 700K or something like that just by removing all the default values. The layout information gets persisted in a readable format. Thing with the layout information is you can actually remove it entirely. It's very hard to merge layout. And anytime you're diffing or whatever, just ignore the layout information entirely because SSIS will just rebuild it once it's loaded up. So somebody dared me before the session to actually do a live merge. So I'm going to do a live merge, and I've never actually done this before. But okay. So we'll see how this goes. So this is my original package. I have a source, a lookup to a destination. I have a modified package. And my modified package, so say another developer has gone in and made a change. Okay, so a source, lookup, derived, and so the main difference here is a new derived column transform. This is what the other developer did. Okay, now I have another package. This is a copy of the first one, and I'm going to make a different change. Okay, I'm going to I'll add a row count because I want to show off something. Row count, and I'll connect the lookup to the row count, and row count has a UI. Wow. Oh, but I don't have a variable. I have to add a variable first. Doesn't let you create a new variable from the UI. I know. I'm ashamed. Okay, so I can map a variable there. Oh, I also want to show you. Hold on, let me show off this. Actually, I don't know if it's something I should show off or not. Pivot has a UI. Okay. Yeah, because everybody loves Pivot. Fancy, eh? Okay. See, if I show it to people who've used Pivot, they understand it. Our testers on our Beijing team kept opening the same bug over and over, just with a screenshot saying, look at picture, saying that there's obviously a bug in this UI. But no, that's the way it's supposed to look. Okay, so I've made another change here. Now I have a row count. So I have 2 different changes, and I'm going to try merging this live on stage for the first time. Without a net, yes. And if this blows up, I'm going to move quickly to my next demo. Okay, so I'm just using my merge utility here so I can actually see what the changes are. Okay, so I see that, so 3 is the one I just changed. So I see that I've added a variable. I don't think I need to zoom. I'm sorry, back, but here I see I have a new I've added a derived column on this side. Okay, so I know what the component is. So one of the things we do is we sort everything by name. So it doesn't matter where they appear in the package. We do it by name, so it keeps things better in line. Okay. We've also, I don't know, let me call this out. So in the data flow, we used a concept called the lineage ID. Lineage IDs were very important. Basically, every element that got added had a unique integer, and we use these lineage IDs throughout. And if you modified a package by 2 different people, none of your lineage IDs would match, so it would be impossible to actually do a merge. We've gotten rid of lineage IDs in the way we persist. We use what's called a ref ID instead. So now every component, every column, everything has a unique string that we call a ref ID. And we still use lineage IDs in the engine. So when the package gets loaded up, we basically regenerate all the lineage IDs. But when you're doing a merge or you're doing a diff or whatever, you can actually do a find replace on ref IDs and have everything update correctly. Make sense? Okay. Again, I do not recommend doing a merge. I am a trained professional. Remember, you're working with XML here, and if you mess up the XML, your package isn't going to load. So I give that warning. I am a trained professional. So let's switch down. Okay, but next, so it looks like I also changed the source query for one of my components. This was my source component in my OLEDB source. So I changed the source query. I assume that's important, so I'll take that change. And what next? I probably changed the access mode to go with, I changed the access mode to change the source query. Let me go down. What else have I? Okay, here's the row count I added on the other side. So let's see if I can, well, I just need to leave that alone. And here are my paths. So here's all my data flow paths. So I know I made one change at least because I added my derived column in there. So I'm going to copy this path over because I assume I need it. And I added a brand new path here. So let me copy this, paste this. Okay, so I should have all the paths now. And I'll save it. And it's going to tell me to reload. And we'll see if it works. See if it works. Oh, flashing's not good. Okay, control flow load. And my data flow loaded too. Now I have the row count and the derived column. So I just did a live merge on stage without a net. Okay. Do not attempt that at home. Okay, VS configurations, pretty simple thing. So in Visual Studio, you have what's called a configuration, right? You can create multiple configurations. This is really common in most programming languages. You'll create a dev, a test, a debug, a release, whatever. We make use of them in SSIS now as well. Okay. What I can do on the parameter UI, okay, here I have a parameter find a source directory. There's a new button post CTB3. I can click Add Parameters to Configurations, and I get this UI. Okay. And so here I can externalize any of my parameter values into the Visual Studio project, okay, and then I can set different values. So for example, for source directory, I have CETL development, test is CETL test, okay. And if I change my configuration, I see that my default value for my parameter changed as well. Okay, now there's two main uses for this. One is if you have multiple developers working on the same project, you can each have configurations, so you don't have to modify your ISPack file, your ISPack file. Two is whenever you build that ISPack file, whatever your active configuration is, those become your default parameters. So you could have different ISPacks for different customers, for different environments, for whatever, and those become your defaults. The admin can still change them during the deployment, but at least you've set relevant defaults for the environment that you're targeting. So you could produce multiple builds that way. Kind of a small feature, but I like to call it out. This was in CTB3, but it did not work at all. So I'm really glad that we did this. Yeah, it was one of those features in CTB3 that I dreaded anybody coming across. So scripts. So we made some changes. We now use the new VSDA 3.0 script engine, which is based on the 2010 shell, which means we have .NET 4 support. Scripts will actually target .NET 4 on the script task. The read-write variables, it filters out the read-only variables, because why would you want to list all your variables you can't actually write to in the read-write variables dialog. That's great. If only we did that on the component UI. Anyways, so yeah, component, everything comes up. We've also improved performance. So at runtime, we used to use VSTA to actually do the execution, so it wasn't just design time, it was runtime as well. And now we just basically compile it down straight to .NET and we call directly. So that gives you a bit of a performance improvement too. So I'm just going to run, I'm going to shred through a number of rows. Hopefully this package runs. So I have an exception in my script component. Okay, let me fix that. So I don't know if anybody's hit this before, but it just occurred to me now. Wouldn't it be neat if I could actually set a breakpoint and debug a script component to actually see the data? I don't think I've ever heard a customer ask for that before. So I'm just talking off the top of my head, but this would be cool if it worked. So basically I could set a breakpoint, and I could run my package again. And when the breakpoint gets hit, the VSTA designer would come up, and I could step through and watch the data and stuff, right? It would be neat. I heard. I think Scott Stoffer, MVP, just said, "Don't waste your time with that." So I'm not going to put this feature in the end. Okay, see right there, I have a value called "This will break your demo," and so that's ended up breaking everything. So I know that's what happened. And it would be fantastic if we had script component debugging in SQL Server Denali. Okay, that's too quiet. We do have script component debugging in SQL Server Denali. Okay, I saw some concerned faces there. Yes, that's my Canadian sarcasm here. Okay, so that's script component. Any questions about those things? Yeah. So we do support breakpoints on the script tasks, and we do support them on script components now. Do you mean if you have multiple breakpoints, do they work, or? Oh, every kind of script component? Yes. All kinds of script components support debugging, so source, destination, and transform. Yeah. Another feature I'll gladly take credit for, even though nobody's ever asked for it. Okay. So that was my demos. Troubleshooting and logging. And actually, how am I for time? I'm okay. Troubleshooting and logging. So, like I said, we have this new SSIS Catalog in Denali. And one of the great things about SSIS is when you run the package in the designer, you get a progress window. It's nice. When you run with each exec, you get a progress window, and it's nice. When you run with SQL Agent or run at production, you think everything's okay until the first error happens, and then you realize you don't have any logging enabled, and you don't know what's going on. Now, when you run things through the SSIS catalog, all those logs get captured. You have different logging levels, right? You have the basic logging would capture errors and warnings and info and all the things you'd expect. We also have performance logging, so you can actually run and get a capture of how much time was spent in each task, how much time was spent in each data flow component. You can actually go through and do that sort of bottleneck analysis and performance analysis directly on the server without any modifications to your packages. You just change the logging level on the server and it works. And I'll show that in an upcoming demo. We also have this new feature called data tabs. So with data tabs, it's kind of like a data viewer on the server. So yeah, don't worry about the SQL. I will go through that in actual demo. But essentially what it does is using T-SQL, I can start an execution. I can create these data tabs on any path in the data flow, and it's going to write out the data flowing through that path to a secure location in a CSV file format. Okay? Now, this is without modifying the package at all. Right? This is purely a DBA action. So this means that, say you have a production environment that the developers don't have access to, right? But an error is occurring, and the DBA swears up and down that it's not a problem with the data, it's a problem with the package. And the developer swears, no, my packages are fine. It's a problem with your data. You can prove it now by creating a data tab, dumping it out. The DBA can then look at the data, make sure it's something the developer can see, and the developer can actually go in and try it out. Right? So dump it to CSV, and you can deal with it from there. Question?
Why did that buffer by buffer?
It appends into a single file, into a single flat file. You can configure the number of rows as well that actually come out. So you don't necessarily want to capture everything. Okay, another question? It's completely different to the data viewer. So data viewers are a design time only thing. It's a Visual Studio thing. This is built into the server itself, to the SSIS catalog. Okay. Again, yeah, no modifications to the package. This is purely done through T-SQL. Binary data? That's a good question. I don't think we log binary data. Yeah, we just log what's in our buffers. The way SSIS transfers binary data, it goes out to a file system anyways, just a file and it's a pointer. So yeah, we just log actual data that can be written to a CSV. One more question? Yeah, so the question is there only one place or one folder that can be written to? Yeah, and that was a security requirement that we needed to sign off. Yeah, that's the default. It's just like memory dumps get written to an error dumps directory. This gets written to a data dumps directory, and it already has default secure permissions. And one more? Do I have to find where the taps are? I'll show that in the demo. Yeah, so just like I have in this picture here where I have specific paths. That's basically, I specify which path in my data flow and which data flow I want the data tap to happen on. I can have multiple in a single run. Okay. So in the next demo, I'll show some of the server logging stuff. I'll go into the data tap details, and I'll also show some server management. Actually, I think I'll do that in reverse order. I'll show the server management stuff first. Okay. So am I for time? When does the session end? It ends at whenever I want to end it. I think it's 1:30. 11:30? Okay. So this next demo is long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provision a brand new SSIS catalog. I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to deploy a package. Deploy a project. I'm going to run a package. Yeah, so I'll do all that. Let me do that. Okay. Creating folder, deploying prod execution demo, and running the package, and I'm done. Okay, next demo. Okay, that's PowerShell. So the whole SSIS catalog has a PowerShell interface. So you can do everything through PowerShell, all common tasks. You can also do everything through T-SQL. So everything can be done. I hear people groaning over the PowerShell stuff, but well, so so the catalog itself has a T-SQL interface. Okay, on top of that, it has a .NET interface. And the way we do our .NET, it's the same way as SMO works and everything in SSMS works. And it basically automatically exposes it as PowerShell objects as well. So you have three interfaces, really. You have a .NET interface if you want to code against it. You have a T-SQL interface if you want to script it T-SQL-wise. And you have a PowerShell interface if you prefer to do things through PowerShell. I'm just starting to get into PowerShell, and I'm liking it more and more. Curious, in the audience, how many people are currently using PowerShell? Okay, good number of people. So yeah, so basically what I did here was, I don't know if I really need to walk through the code, but yeah, I created the assembly. I created a connection to the server. I checked, I can do all my maintenance. I created a new catalog right here. I create a new folder right here. I do my deployment, right? It's all very, very simple lines of code to actually get all this stuff done. Very, very powerful interface. And this is post-CTP3 stuff. In CTP3, when you try to launch the PowerShell thing, you'll get an error. It's a .NET framework issue, or a version issue, but that's been resolved post-CTP3. Okay, so that's PowerShell. Okay, so the question is, can I script out things I've already done and like save? Basically, I do it through the UI and then I do a save as script. You can do that. You can't save to a PowerShell script, but you can save to a T-SQL script, right? So just like in SSMS, every dialog has a script dialog, right? And I think there's going to be a talk tomorrow. Rashab and David Morey are going to be talking about deployment best practices and upgrade best practices, and they'll talk about that sort of thing, about doing the scripting and so yeah, through SSMS, like I said, you connect to the database engine. You don't connect to the SSIS service anymore. And you can still connect to the SSIS service. So another key point for Denali, everything that used to work continues to work. SSIS Catalog is completely optional. You can take advantage of. New projects will target it by default. My general recommendation is to try it out. If you already have an execution framework and you're happy with the execution framework, you get a lot of benefit going to Denali because you get all the developer improvements. If you're doing a brand new project, I'd try targeting the SSIS Catalog because there's really a lot of built-in functionality now for you. You don't have to worry about managing that framework yourself. So by default, when I connect to a brand new SQL instance, this will be empty. I do a create catalog, and it will create a catalog. Another new thing post-CTP3 is I can connect to a remote machine as well and create catalogs. I could connect to a clustered SQL Server, clustered SQL Server environment and do a create catalog. And then it creates an SSIS DB. Currently, we only support a single catalog per SQL Server instance. You'll notice it's set up in a way that we could do multiple catalogs. It was a feature we ended up cutting because most customers didn't. We couldn't get real cases for that. But so currently the main catalog that's created is called SSIS DB. And under that, I have a set of folders, and each folder can contain projects and environments. If you want more details about the server itself, again, come to the pavilion. We have lots of demos on that stuff. But I want to show some of the SQL interfaces here. So here I have a script. I'm going to run a package. Okay, so that's creating a package execution. I'm going to set some parameter values. So this is specific for this execution. I'm going to set some other, like I'm going to change the logging level to perf level, for example, which I do here. And then I'm going to start the execution. Okay. So I need to reconnect to my database. And that runs, so that gives me the execution ID, which is a 36. Okay, and while this package is running, I can do stuff like, what is it, 36? I can query the active perf counters. I need to switch to SSIS DB. Hopefully my package is still running. Yeah, so I can query the active perf counters. So we capture perf counters while the package is actually running. Okay. We don't log these, but we do capture them. So you could set up your own capture script if this is what you want to do while the package is actually active. Okay. I can also get a performance breakdown per transform. So I'm querying off of off the tables, right, directly. Run that. All right, so now that's a breakdown of the package, all the different transforms, and the active time, and then the total time it took to run. The active time is usually the one you care about. So I see I have a script component called this should be fast that's taking the most amount of time. That's something worth investigating. That looks like a bottleneck. And yeah, like I said, you can actually break down. It captures at the task level. It captures and the data flow it captures at a per component level basis as well. So you build up all your reports. There's a lot of built-in reports as well. So if I look at the catalog, I can go to reports, and my starting point is my integration services dashboard. Okay, from the integration services dashboard, I can see what's been run in the past 24 hours. I see the number of currently running, the failed, the number of succeeded. I can click down and show me all the package executions and drill down to another report, and it shows me status. I can look at the performance of an execution, and I see performance over time, a little graph here. I see my average time spent, total duration, does some summary stuff for me. Right? So all of this is exposed through SSIS DB, through a set of views and tables in SSIS DB, okay, that you can query yourself. You can write your own reports off of. MVP Jamie Thompson has already published a report pack up to Codeplex that has his own set of custom reports, goes into much more detail. He's a much better reporting artist than we are, apparently. And yeah, he has some great stuff. Also new in post-CTP3 is a new ID. It's a system parameter, a system variable that lets you link your own custom logging. It's called package execution ID. Lets you link your own custom logging with the logs that go into the SSIS DB catalog, so you can correlate. So if you still have your own logging framework, you can tie them all together. Okay, that wasn't in CTP3. And yeah, so you can query all that. So we provided these views and stuff are fully documented. There's a post on the SSIS team blog from Jamie Thompson, actually, that goes into detail about the key tables that you want to take a look at, stuff like that. Okay. And let me see what other kind of reports I can show real quick. I can see what's active. I can see... Oh, yeah, I don't think I have this one set up, but I can drill down to errors. And so I can filter. One of the things we do is we bubble up errors related to connections, because that's the most common form of configuration error, right? You can't connect to a host, or you forget to change a parameter or something like that. So we have a report that specifically shows reports related to connections. And I'll actually break down into what the connection string was used, and you can drill down and see what the error message was. Right, so it sort of bubbles up the most important information that DBAs are usually looking for when you're looking at these sorts of reports. Okay. Now I'll show a quick demo on, I'll close all these. Show a quick demo on data taps. Okay. So the SQL here is to create an execution. Oh, let me just do one quick thing. For the way I generated these scripts here, I didn't write it all by hand. I don't have this API memorized. But I drilled down to the package, and I did a right-click and did an execute. So this is doing an interactive execution. And it brings up an execution UI. And here it tells me immediately what parameters I actually need to map in. Okay, so I can set a value here. That parameter was set to what's called required, means there is no default value, means who's ever running the package has to specify it, whether that's the parent or whether it's the person actually doing the execution. Okay, so no more accidental use of default values within your package. And also notice we bubble up all the connection managers, like I said. So a developer doesn't have to explicitly configure or explicitly add a parameter to a connection. They're automatically exposed. If the developer has added a parameter to a connection manager, that property gets hidden from this list, so it doesn't get double set. So if it already has an expression on it, it doesn't get exposed in this list. So for example, if your connection manager gets set by a parent package through expression, you can't accidentally overwrite that value. So I set my values. I have it all set up the way I want. On the Advanced tab, I can set whether I want 32-bit runtime or 64-bit, and I can set my logging level. Another new feature post CTB3 is I can set a default logging level server-wide. Okay, but the default when you start is basic, but you can set it to none if you don't need that logging. Performance will capture the performance information. Verbose captures everything. Diagnostics is really more for the diagnostic stuff. A friend of mine at work was saying he's running pretty basic packages, and in about 5 hours he had about 300 megs of log files. So verbose is very verbose. You typically want to run performance if you want to do that performance statistics, or the basic mode is the default. Yeah. No, so this sort of logging will capture everything. The question is, can I actually filter out, like you could in the designer, right? You can actually capture which ones. So the loggers within the designer still work. If you want to do very specific forms of logging, filter out very specific events or capture, you can still use the same loggers that you can use today. You can direct that to SQL Server. You can correlate them, right? You can do all that stuff. But yeah, this logging, we don't have that. That would be a nice feature. It's a feature I'd like to add where you can actually, like X event type style, where you can specify which events you want to capture and custom logging levels. But that's not going to be in Denali. Question? So the question is there any sort of self-cleanup? That would be really smart if we did that. And I'll take a look to see whether we did that in just a second. So I set up my execute package task to the UI. And what I can do is I just do a script to new query window. Okay, I'll cancel this because I don't want to launch it. This basically gives me that whole script. Now I can use that as my starting point, right? That works in many SSMS UIs. But this is typically, when I'm using the T-SQL API, this is how I do it. I'll start this way. Okay, so what I'm going to let me show the cleanup before I forget. So there's a property on the catalog itself. This is where I can set server properties. I can set a retention period, right? So this is the default retention period for my logs. Okay? It's also going to create a cleanup job, a SQL agent cleanup job that will run, I don't know, I think it's every day, but you can control it. So yeah, so you can control your retention window. Okay. And here's where I set my maximum number of versions per project. So we actually store multiple versions of the project. You can roll back. You can only have one active project version at a time, but you can roll back to previous versions of a project if you need to do that. And you can also set default encryption levels and stuff too, but I won't get into that here. Okay, so I'm going to create a data tab. So I start off by creating my execution ID. Okay, then I'm going to set the variables I needed. Remember, I saw I needed a batch ID. I'm going to set a logging level. And then I set some parameters. The parameters I'm setting, basically I specify the path to my data flow task. Then I set the name of that path, which is going to be paths, and then basically the source and its output. And then I specify a file name. I don't specify a directory because the dumps will go to a single directory, but I have to specify the file name itself. Okay? And then I call add data tap, store procedure. And then I run the package. So let me do that. Execution 37. And I have data dumps directory here. And here's my data dump that was just created. Okay. I can edit and take a look at all the data there, and I could go through. So yeah, basically a data viewer on the server without having to modify any of my packages. Okay. I think it's pretty handy. I think that was it for this demo. So let me switch back. Okay. So that was my top 10 features. But my top 10 list is so action-packed, I have 11 features to talk about. Okay. Well, I'm going to start off with some stories about metadata. And again, probably these are only stories that I've heard once or twice. You guys might not be able to relate to these. But first story, it came up a couple of weeks ago. We have this internal mailing list. So SSIS is used everywhere at Microsoft. There's tons of teams using it at Microsoft. And we have this internal alias called SSIS Talk. And somebody posted that they have to decommission a server that's running lots of SSIS packages. Is there an easy way to figure out how many packages are running on it, first of all, and what packages they connect to? Like, which systems would be affected if I decommission that server? And I replied, no.
Actually, isn't there a third-party product?
Who uses third-party products? Change Council. This is another customer story that may or may not sound familiar. So I was working with another customer and talking to their IT department. And they're a pretty big insurance company. And they have this thing called the Change Council. When I asked them how they manage schema changes, the guy started twitching. And he went into this long story about the Change Council. And what the Change Council is a group of 80 people. And they meet every month. And they go through a 40-page document of every schema change that's been proposed across the organization. And they go through them one by one. They say, okay, we are changing column A in table B. Is anybody affected? And 80 people in the room have to say whether they're affected or not. And if you don't know whether you're affected or you don't call it out, everything's going to break for you. Okay? So everybody is terrified of making schema changes. And people start, instead of making schema changes, they'll just set up a brand new system. And if they don't have access to the database, they'll just start grabbing the data from the reports. Right? So everybody's been built out. And because of the process, IT started wondering, like, we're not getting any requests to create databases anymore. It's because everybody is just so terrified of this Change Council. They all just break off and do their own thing. Okay. Next story. Upgrading a database. And some people will be amused to find out this happened internally at Microsoft. So we use VSTS for our all of our bug tracking, SQL-wide VSTS database. And we also have this main reporting services server called Rose Reports. And there's hundreds of reports on there that teams have created to do reporting against the VSTS database. And now, at one point, we wanted to upgrade this database. We wanted to move it to the latest version of Denali. Now, over time, as people have been adding reports, people have modified the default schema. They've added their own indexes. They've done all kinds of optimizations to make sure that the reports, right? These are SQL people. They understand how these things work. They like doing the optimizations. So they did a test migration. They moved it to a new server. They're running all the reports off Rose Reports. Things are performing pretty well. They flip the switch. They make it live. The server crawls. It starts, basically, the amount of reports coming in just brings it to its knees. Because it turns out there's more than just one reporting server hitting it. Right? There turned out to be 50 reporting servers. Every team had their own reporting server with their own custom reports hitting this database. Right? And the people doing the migration hadn't accounted for those missing indexes and stuff. So it took them days to actually go through and figure that out. But we were thinking, well, wouldn't it be great if we could have figured all that out beforehand? Last story. Where do these values come from? So this is another customer we were working with, and they had a report. And they're an analyst. They had to present something to their CIO, and they're looking at one of the values in one of the columns. They're like, this isn't right. Like, I know for a fact this isn't right. So he goes to the IT person who wrote the report. It takes a couple days to get in touch with them, but the IT person looks at the report, says, the report's right. It must be a problem in the data warehouse. They go to the data warehouse guy. Data warehouse guy goes, no, look, this looks fine. It must be a problem with the source system. Source system guy looks at it and says, no, it's probably a problem in the ETL. The ETL guy looks at it. And this keeps going back. And it takes them 3 weeks to trace back to somebody who actually finds, oh, yeah, there's a problem here. Right? And it's because they actually have to go through, like, each person knows who's upstream from them or who's downstream from them, but they don't have a view end to end. Right? So, introducing my number 11 is Project Barcelona Metadata Discovery. Who here has heard about Project Barcelona before? Okay, so a couple people. So Project Barcelona, last year at PASS, I came up and talked about this great thing called dependency services. It was a great feature. If you remember, we had 3 pillars of a release: the dev experience, the admin experience, and metadata. And one of those pillars has disappeared since then. That's because we realized that this is a very important thing. The way that our dependency services was being developed was basically as a subset of SSIS. It deserved its own project. We basically broke all that stuff out and created a new project called Project Barcelona. Barcelona, all the information, they're being very transparent with their design process. There's demos available online. I can send you links as well. It's projectbarcelona.cloudapp.net. You can actually play with the UI that I'm going to go and demo today. So the way Barcelona works and why it's not a metadata repository and why they get angry at me if I even say those words is because it's automatic. It's zero touch. Okay? That the whole value prop here is that it's zero touch. So say you have 3 different systems. It could be SQL, it could be SSIS packages, reports, OData feeds, SharePoint lists, whatever. You have these different systems, and within them they have their own, like a table has columns and stuff, and you have ways of figuring out, sometimes you have ways of figuring out what the dependencies are inside of them. And you sort of are aware that they talk to each other, but you don't necessarily know the details. What Barcelona lets you do is you send out these crawlers, kind of like a web search, and actually go in and determine all this stuff automatically. Okay? So by looking at it knows how to parse SQL schemas. It can parse store procedures. It knows how things communicate. It looks at SSIS packages to see how data is flowing around. It looks at RS reports and see where the data is being sourced from. Right? And starts building up 2 main things. One is impact analysis. Right? So it figures out, okay, if I change this column, what gets affected downstream? And it figures out data lineage as well. So this is what these green arrows mean. This is the data flow. Right? Where's this data flowing from? And I can look at the end and and trace it back to the source. And this does across systems. It also does inside of systems too. Sometimes when you're looking at this metadata, you'll actually be surprised that things you weren't aware of or that were connected are actually connected internally as well. Okay. So these crawlers basically go out and collect all this data and put it all into a single index server. And currently we're providing this web-based UI around the index server. Okay. That gives you a breakdown, basically a breakdown of your topology. Like I said, this is available online, so you can start playing with it if you want. Let me switch over to that demo. Question? Yeah. Do we do Excel spreadsheets? I have an Excel icon there. That might mean we do Excel spreadsheets. I'm not actually a member of the Barcelona team. I have cards for the people to contact for more details. I could do this high-level demo. I'm a point-and-click monkey at this point. But I believe what we want to do, and one of the reasons it's not going to be releasing with Denali RTM, is we want to be thorough. We want to do the entire Microsoft stack. So they have their own release schedule. They're currently doing private CTPs. They will be doing public CTPs as well. So okay, so this is the view. And so the test system they use, and I'll just describe it fast. It's this mythical music system, or music producer, sales system. It's not called Contoso for some reason. It's called Chinook. And basically they have 3 main databases. They have this inventory feeder database, and that's where all their records and stuff to sell, their albums to sell. They have this sales database that actually records the sales transactions, and they have this data warehouse, and they do some reporting off it as well. Okay, so this is something you get from Barcelona. You just put it down, point the crawlers at your systems, and it goes out and starts discovering. And this is the high-level view. These are all the top-level objects or all the system-level objects that it's found. Okay, so it's found some databases. It's found some SSIS packages. It's found some file system stuff, some flat files. Found some reports. This is an OData feed. This is a SharePoint server, and it's found some reporting server instance as well. Okay. So I'm running out of time, so I'll just skip. album name. So I can search for a specific column. Okay, and I can filter on artifact type. So I want a column. I'll do get dependents. Okay. Now, with this view, I can see where that album name column was actually being used. So here, it's underlined in red because that's where I started, and the number beside it means that's the number of things within this object that affect or impacted by this album name thing. So I see the data flows out to SSIS packages called on a Chinook sales server. I see that one of the packages is actually writing out to a flat file. That looks interesting. And more data is flowing to a sales database. And if I keep scrolling over, database goes to a data warehouse. More packages. These are packages that load the data warehouse. That is apparently being exposed by an OData feed to a SharePoint server, to a custom report, which is on a reporting server instance. Okay, so I can trace all that. And again, this was no manual entry. This was just the crawler going out and taking a look at those. So this is basically a zero cost and a zero touch operation. Okay, so I can expand this and double click album title. So album title within that report, it's one of my columns within the report. I can double click and it's going to do the lineage. Okay, so from the lineage, and it's in relation to what I was currently searching. So I have album title, and I can see all the different fields it's come through. So here's my report. It came from SharePoint, which was an OData feed through SharePoint, which was based off of a SQL column. This is within an SSIS package, right? So this is the OLADB destination. I can see down at the bottom here. It actually says OLADB destination. I see that it was merged with something, so that's interesting. So that means my data was coming in and actually merged with something else. So I could pivot it. At the moment, I can't pivot to actually see where that data is coming in from, but that's something I could do in the future. I see that it was sorted as well, and I see the source. And I can see the source systems that it actually came from. Right? I can trace back to the schemas and see the stored procedures it interacted with, so end to end. And again, zero touch. And there's checkboxes here. So if I go back to that top level, how do I do this? If I go back to that top level and say I want Chinook sales. Oh, there's a dash in there. Okay, and here's an actual database. So the server. I want to do that decommissioning the server. I do get dependents. I can list all of the dependencies here, right? List them out here, expand all. And I have a little checklist, so this becomes like a workflow type thing too. Like I know if I need to change this column, here's my workflow. I need to update or address each of these columns. I have a little annotation system here too. I can click and add annotations like this is way too hard to do, or somebody else needs to look at this. And yeah, so I can actually, so we're trying to build in the workflow model as well. Again, this is as you see from the black and white, this is still test UI, or we're trying out new things. But that's Barcelona. I don't have time to go into any more details about it, but if you're interested, I'd be happy to talk to you at the EIM booth, and if you're interested in trying it out, I'd be happy to hook you up with the PMs who are handling that sort of thing. Okay, so let me just, I think I have 3 minutes. I'll go down to the summary. So again, SQL Server Denali. All right, two main things. I'm really excited about it. I think this is the biggest release for the SSIS team. Everybody we've been talking to is really excited about it as well. Yeah, two main things, usability and the configuration, deployment, and management experiences. If you want more demos, come down to the pavilion. If you have deep questions, come to the EAM booth. If you want to know more about the Attunity stuff, Attunity is more than happy to answer that in the pavilion as well. There's some resources for you guys. If you want to know more about the CTP3 stuff, check out my Denali presentation. I didn't go much into data quality services, but they have some talks today. They're worth taking a look at as well. And then there's a link down to Project Barcelona at the bottom there, the team blog. And like I said, that demo that I just went through is available online, projectbarcelona.cloudapp.net. And there's links to that off the site. Please fill out the evals. If you score me well, I will come back next year. If you don't, I don't come back. So please fill out the evals. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks.